What would you do if a power-tripping neighbor tried to use a homeowners association to bully you, fine you, and tow your property? In today's story, the protagonist's response is a masterclass in how to not only win but dismantle the entire corrupt system from the inside out. Let me start with a piece of advice I wish I'd had: never, ever purchase a house in an HOA. It's a mess that feels like it should be illegal. If I had known what they were truly like, I would never have bought my first home in one. My wife, Chloe, and I bought our first home when we were 24 and 25, respectively. We were young, optimistic, and looking for our forever home in a good school district for the family we hoped to have one day. After months of searching, we found the perfect house at a decent price. For the first few months, everything was idyllic. The neighborhood was beautiful, the neighbors seemed decent, and life was good. That all changed over a rented RV. We decided to take a trip and rented an RV, parking it in our own driveway for 3 days beforehand so we could pack it and I could figure out how all its systems worked. This, apparently, was a cardinal sin. This is when we discovered that not only are HOAs insane, but our next-door neighbor, a man we'll call Mr. Henderson, was on the board. Within an hour of the RV being parked, he was home. He didn't knock, he didn't call. He stormed across his lawn and into my driveway, his face contorted with rage. He demanded we remove the RV from his neighborhood immediately, threatening to have it towed and fine us for every single hour it remained. At that moment, Mr. Henderson thought he was asserting his dominance, completely unaware that this single act of aggression would trigger a chain of events leading to his own downfall. I'm a pretty reasonable person, but I don't respond well to being screamed at on my own property. I calmly told him to get the hell out of my driveway and that if he returned, I'd call the police. As he was screaming inches from my face like a complete madman, he stormed off, and I thought, for a moment, that might be the end of it. I was wrong. About 3 hours later, a massive big rig tow truck pulled up to my house. Mr. Henderson walked up behind it, puffed up like a god, and handed me a plain, unmarked envelope. Inside was a letter, not on any official letterhead, stating that by order of the HOA this RV is to be towed and that I was being fined $1,500. While Mr. Henderson might not listen to reason, the tow truck driver was a different story. He looked from the RV, to me, to my property line. I told him plainly that if his truck entered my driveway to tow a vehicle without a legal warrant, I would be calling the cops on him for trespassing and attempted theft. The driver, clearly not paid enough to get involved in this brand of crazy, decided he was done and left, seeing his ultimate power move fizzle out. Mr. Henderson went even more berserk and stormed off again. Shaken, I called a friend whose father, Mr. Davies, was an attorney. I needed to know what my rights were against this insane letter and fine. After hearing the story, he told me to come down to his office the next day, write him a $500 check, and bring every single piece of paper I got when I bought the house, along with the crazy letter. The next day, a very different kind of letter was sent out. Mr. Davies drafted a document addressed to Mr. Henderson and the entire HOA board that essentially, in the most eloquent and binding legal terms, told my neighbor to leave us and our property alone. That $500 check was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was just the beginning of my education in fighting an HOA. Of course, it didn't stop. I continued to receive daily fines of $1,500, each delivered in a plain envelope stuffed directly into my mailbox. Each time, I turned the illegal mail over to Mr. Davies, who sent another round of letters and contacted the USPS to report the mail tampering incidents. It turns out, putting anything in someone's mailbox that isn't official, postmarked mail is a federal crime. Who knew? We went on our week-long trip, doing our best to forget the drama. When we returned, we parked the RV in the driveway again for 2 days to unload and clean it before taking it back. And just like clockwork, 2 more envelopes appeared in our mailbox, which led to 2 more visits to our attorney, and 2 more reports to the USPS. This is where the fun really began. Mr. Henderson finally gave me a summons to appear before the board. My attorney took one look at it and laughed. They had used a document designed to look like an official legal summons, which was wildly illegal and improper. Another $500 went to Mr. Davies, and we prepared for the meeting date they had set on a Tuesday at 10 a.m., a time clearly chosen to inconvenience a working person. When we arrived, they tried to keep Mr. Davies out of the room, citing some made-up board privacy rule. They shut up very quickly when my attorney began calmly quoting their own HOA bylaws back to them, pointing out every rule they themselves were violating. The board made a classic blunder of the arrogant. They believed their self-appointed authority could override actual law, a miscalculation that was about to be spectacularly corrected. Deep within the HOA governing documents were some very specific rules outlining what makes a board member ineligible to serve. It listed certain infractions that would disqualify them. And guess who had committed several of those very infractions? Mr. Henderson, with every action meticulously documented by me and my attorney. But here was the real cherry on top. The bylaws also stated that if 51% of the HOA members voted to dissolve the HOA, the whole thing would simply cease to exist. While this legal battle was raging, my wife Chloe, who worked part-time from home, had a lot of free time. She channeled her frustration into a new project, a disband the HOA campaign. For the next 2 months, she went door to door, getting to know our neighbors on a whole new level. It turned out, almost everyone disliked the HOA and the power-hungry seniors who ran it like a personal fiefdom. The HOA board panicked. They tried to stall by refusing to hold any meetings, which was yet another violation of their own rules. They launched their own counter-campaign, which included a shockingly racist flyer sent to every homeowner, warning of the dangers of not having an HOA, claiming that bad people, specifically Black and Mexican families, would move in, sell drugs, and destroy our property values. This revealed the board's greatest fatal flaw, their desperation and prejudice, which ultimately sealed their fate by alienating the very people they needed to convince. It's incredibly satisfying to use someone's own rules against them. The community even started a fund that paid us back for our initial and ongoing attorney fees. A few weeks after their failed fear campaign, we used their own bylaws to force a meeting and call a vote. The result was a landslide. The HOA was no more. Any remaining funds were supposed to be dispersed equally back to the homeowners. Unsurprisingly, those funds had somehow vanished, supposedly spent during the board's last 2 months of flailing. As a commenter on my story later noted, they probably didn't have any receipts to prove they used the money for its intended purpose. Within a few months, about half of the former board members sold their homes and moved, including the man who started it all, Mr. Crazy Neighbor himself, Mr. Henderson. The racist letters they sent actually made the local news, but it was too long ago for me to find the articles now. I learned a lot from this ordeal. As another person who went through this commented, "You must read the HOA documents. Just because a rule seems arbitrary doesn't mean you can ignore it, because an army of lawyers will eagerly take HOA money to ruin your life over it. And never, ever pick a stupid fight with a board member. They often have way too much time on their hands and will try to ruin you." The moral of this whole mess is simple: be incredibly careful before you buy a home in an HOA, and if you do, be prepared to get very familiar with the bylaws and maybe even hire an attorney. At the end of the day, when you're in an HOA, you don't have a 100% ownership interest in your own property, and that can really, really suck. So, what do you think? Have you ever had a nightmare experience with an HOA, and how did you handle it?